welcome to all the attendees of today's webinar. Let's set the stage first for today's discussion. Next slide, please. A very common phenomena in today's business landscape is this notion of gray work. This impacts the construction industry no differently than many other types of organization. So what is gray work? It can be defined and is defined by a study that QuickBase put together as work performed using ad hoc technical solutions in order to make do when your technology doesn't work for you. Let's take that apart a little bit. Your department uses tools to perform vital job functions. They don't integrate well with one another, or they don't produce quite the right reports that you need. So you build those capabilities yourself. What tools would you use for this? Well, the answer is whatever is available. Joan in accounting is an Excel whiz. Then the choice is Excel. Pretty soon you've got a department full of functions with some expensive software tools and a whole lot of Excel spreadsheets that glue together and extract data in the form it's actually needed. Maybe some spreadsheets are emailed. You are making do in this situation. It's been said that most people would be shocked to see just how much of today's commerce relies on spreadsheets in order to function. And it's true. I know this from my own experience working in large organizations. Spreadsheets have a low cost, a low barrier to entry, are easy to use, are ubiquitous, and use a metaphor, tables with rows and columns, that's very, very intuitive. Not to pick on spreadsheets, because we have businesses run on Word documents, databases, third-party apps, random platforms, random specialized tools, all glued together where the operation is performed manually by teams performing gray work. Gray work is often ungoverned, arbitrary, unorganized, and unplanned, and outside of the realm of IT. It's gray. It leads to a very disconnected experience for business users. At Quandary, we see this impacting business users or business units within larger organizations where there is a disconnect in priority understanding or budget between business and IT. We also see it in small organizations or where there's a very small IT budget. We see gray work happening everywhere. Next slide, please, Fong. Here's a powerful statistic. According to McKinsey, gray work, the act of making do, and its inefficiencies cost companies an estimated $900 billion annually in lost productivity. Let's dig into this a little bit. Next slide, please, Fong. In a gray work survey conducted by QuickBase, and this can be downloaded from QuickBase's website, 67% of respondents spend 10 to 20 hours per week chasing data across disparate systems. That's 25% to 50% of respondents' time they're not using to address key business need, items that have higher priority, do innovative activities, or whatever their core business purpose is. This is expensive gray work, but it's not much wonder that it occurs. The pain is real, and simple solutions have a really fast return on investment, like spreadsheets. In the construction space, in the exact same survey, 37% of respondents in construction believe that their software solutions do not impact productivity, positive or negatively, at all. So for more details on the construction industry, I'll pass it over to you, Bob.
Dennis, thank you so much. I think it's always interesting to kind of see those statistics because I think I was one of those persons actually that was spending that much time hunting down the information on the construction site. So just thank you to Quandary for having me join, and I'm excited to kind of share my background and history within construction as it relates to QuickBase and how we've been able to kind of figure out, or at least get our hands around, this gray work problem that we're continuing to see in the industry. And it's important that we begin to identify the solutions and start talking about it so that we can begin finding and working with partners like Quandary to find those solutions to help integrate with what is out there and available and bring to life a lot of what I think ideas are that a lot of the construction companies have today, but have just been unable to either find something off the shelf, and they're trying to figure out, well, what is kind of cost effective and how do we build something to suit our process, bringing our value add. So really excited to share. Thank you, and do encourage everyone to use the chat in questions. So Phong, if you don't mind, if you go to the next slide. So what was interesting is the theme of this webinar is about construction projects ending on time and within budget. Unfortunately, only 8.5% based upon these Harvard Review studies end that way. And I think a lot of that has a lot of various reasons, one of which is the gray work that we talked about before that Dennis was alluding to. So, but here's what gets interesting. When we look at this in terms of the projects that are not ending on time and on budget, 82% of the AEC companies plan to invest the same or more in technology. So we need to understand that as this, and I think if you saw on that slide of gray work, all of the different systems that are being put into place continue to grow. And this is something that we need to wrap our minds around in terms of where are all these pieces of data along the value stream and how do they connect so that we begin taking action, that we have the dashboards in place, we have the KPIs and metrics that when we're sitting there, we can make valuable decisions to help these construction projects finish on time and on budget moving forward. And I think what we're seeing is how complex projects are getting. And I think that's the next slide, but before I get there, it's really about how complex these projects are getting with all of these different systems, all of the different departments in working together. This is a little bit different than what it's been before in the past, 20, 30 years ago. And so we're keeping up with the trends and where it's heading to in the next 12 months. So keep that in mind. Because 40% of contractors say it's difficult to find the time to implement and train on new technology. So let's think about that for a second. So not only are we investing, we're buying new technology, but basically half of the contractors are saying it's difficult to even find the time to train. So as we think about onboarding and new hires, et cetera, the worst case scenario is buying a lot of software off the shelf that doesn't suit your process. You're creating a brand new process, and you're going to have to train on that as well. There's a lot of factors that fall into play. And it's not to say that every piece of software out there is bad. It definitely has a lot of possibilities and solutions to it. But when we think about this, I find this really intriguing because QuickBase, from where I came from, helped us to create the standard operating procedure for the company. We were able to work with the key decision makers on a project to kind of figure out, okay, what does this mean? What is the process? And let's build to suit what it is. And we began actually uncovering a lot of stones in that fashion. So hopefully we kind of build to suit so that we're not creating more gray work by buying something off the shelf, and kind of goes in that way. So a lot of interesting statistics and seeing how it kind of trends forward. But Phong, if you don't mind, if you want me to move forward. And as I mentioned, what we're seeing is projects are not getting any simpler. They're getting more and more complex. And because we're getting more and more systems in place, we have a lot more data points, a lot more volume of data. We think about models, we think about planning, layout, design. We think about all the invoicing, schedule values. These are data points along the value stream. And when we have too many disconnected manual tools, if they're not talking to each other, we're creating isolation. And so we become seeing these pods, these departments, the job site. If they're not calling back, how do they get their information? And so I think it's exciting partnering with Quandary and others that they can begin to build out these solutions that help to bridge that disconnect. And how do we create the right dashboards at the right time with the right information for foremen, for project managers, for PLD, for logistics? Doesn't really matter what the department is. It's a matter of understanding the needs, the scope, and the business impact and creating it all the way through. So really exciting. Phong, if you don't mind, if we can proceed to the next few slides. So for those who haven't seen QuickBase, maybe this is your first time hearing all this, I think it's important to kind of recognize what is QuickBase. So let's take a look at the next slide. So what do we do for construction? I mean, we are a relational database at its core. We are a low code, no code software that begins to kind of sit there. Let's take your process map and let's create forms and fields and databases and relationships that begin to kind of come together. So in building that, you could begin to create these dashboards, and there's a view of it, as well as mobile functionality along the way to kind of help all of this out along. As we talk about Excel spreadsheets and how maybe we can create something and it serves a purpose, but where's the workflow? Where's the dashboards? Where's the real-time updates that are occurring with that? And can you tailor that entire value stream to a system that's going to scale with you as the projects get more complex? And that's the key, because we're not getting any simpler, we're getting more complex. And so pick the solution that's going to grow with you over time with it. So being on the cloud is obviously the benefit. And I don't think we'll get too much into it today, but the pipelines, the integrations that we have, and the open APIs to connect just add to the value of the platform. So really excited. All right. I think we might have what, 1 or 2 more slides. So what are we doing at QuickBase to really kind of begin talking about construction more? And it's getting really exciting. Construction, QuickBase is investing a lot more within the construction side of the fence. We're bringing in people. We understand that this is a major need within the industry, and that typically there might not be all of those bespoke solutions out there that you're looking for. So in order to just become making sure that we're relevant out there along the lines of, they might see things as like Procore and others, how are we talking about solutions in pre-construction, project support, resource management, execution, accounting, safety, et cetera? These are just a small subset, a small sample of potential templates and applications that we plan to put out there on the exchange, but allow you to continue to expand and edit upon them. Everybody has a unique process. We accept that, and we want to make sure to kind of build with partners like Quandary to make that exactly what you're looking for. So we're building in experts and expertise to build out applications, but also understanding that there's still a lot more work to do once you kind of understand what your dashboards, what's your workflows, notifications, et cetera. So Quandary can help with that and more to come. So exciting to see. And I think kind of giving that backdrop, I think it's probably good to kind of get into some real world examples of really what Quandary's been able to do within the construction industry. So with that, Luke, I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob. All right, so yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about first the overview of the client, of the challenges we faced, and then we'll get into kind of specifics regarding the application. So as we mentioned, this is a top 3 fast food chain within the United States. They have over 3,000 locations nationwide, and they are currently doing a massive rollout of this construction project at all of their restaurants. Construction is never easy, never straightforward. This was a mammoth undertaking between resource utilization, construction, managing different entities, GCs, et cetera. You know, the executives at this client knew that some of their projects took a while, but they had no idea as to specifically why. As Dennis mentioned earlier in this webinar, they were using spreadsheets for a lot of their date tracking when it came to milestones. And the point of failure with that is somebody forgot to open up that Excel file one time and forgot to put in the date, and then you lose credibility with your data. Additionally, so with that issue we were tackling came also a lack of coordination when it came time to, the restaurant has to close at some point because we're going to have construction things happening. And as you all know, when something closes, they can't earn money. And so increased downtime at a restaurant meant loss of sales. If not coordinated correctly, this could eat into more profits than it really should. And so this came from they needed to be able to quickly glean insights from rolled up data to make decisions on where to invest more time, where to invest more money, what was taking so long, if anything, and why. So we worked with them. They had a smaller application built out already for a test group. And then we needed to be able to scale that. And so that way they can move fast and improve their turnaround time on projects. Next slide, please. All right. So just a little bit about kind of our approach here. We had to work hand in hand with the client and do a discovery with them, and really to figure out what their process was start to finish when it came to the workflow of, or I should say, the life cycle of a project. So we built out one application. It enabled end users to easily enter in data. At the same time, it enabled executives the ability to see programmatic summaries. Executives don't have time to go through every individual record. They need that quick dashboard, like Bob mentioned. Some other people need dashboards as well. And kind of what I was referring to earlier about people working in spreadsheets, we were able to heavily lean into quick basis automation, whether it's webhooks or pipelines, to be able to mitigate and reduce the amount of missing data, erroneous data, due to rules of when this happens, this is the expected date for the next milestone. And we'll get into kind of what that looks like, but yeah. Next slide, please. All right. So the exciting bit, we're going to demo a little bit of the application again. These are screenshots of certain parts of the application for sensitivity of the client. So we rapidly were able to build a custom application with a hyper complex system of sophisticated logic and systems that ultimately enabled an automated workflow. So when we think generally speaking about a construction project, or even most projects in general, not even construction, but there is an overarching project and then there are milestones to hit within that project. We can see an example of some milestones here. And every milestone belongs to a phase. So if you think about a project might have a survey phase, and it might have a design phase, then a permitting, et cetera, ultimately to construction and closeout. So we had this very sophisticated hierarchy of milestones that the client has given to us, and where they belong and what sequence and order they should go. This is really where all the magic happened that enabled reporting. Again, we are looking at the ground level. This is where end users come in and they could say, hey, this is complete. This is where QuickBase was able to automatically project and baseline out future dates based on when it was actually completed. So kind of tough to capture in a still, but basically that scheduled date you'd see there in that embedded report, that was never populated by humans. That was populated always by QuickBase to keep humans honest, and as well as really give a breakdown of, hey, we were expecting this on the 19th of February this year, and let's say the actual date was March 1st. Again, with an Excel sheet, pretty easy to mess that up or just fudge a number or two. But this way we were able to hold people accountable and really give better clarity in regards to what was taking so long in what part of the process. One of the other things is, as I mentioned, we had a baseline here. So we worked with the client to basically draw up an expected duration for each of these milestones. And then when a project started to deviate, we actually were able to adjust that to be able to forecast completion. So on project initialization, yes, it was projected to be done in December 1st. These 4 phases took longer than anticipated. Here's the forecasted complete now. We also see here the ability to add documents as well, such as things with like design packets, construction drawings, all that good stuff. We enabled users to very easily upload documents, plural, and then store them in a repository, which we have at the bottom of the screenshot there. Next slide, please. So we can do a lot, which is that very quote unquote simple architecture, and kind of shifting to the more peripheral part of the project. So we were working with a bunch of different entities, architects, project managers, franchisee owners of the restaurants, general contractors. And one of the features that we noticed was tough to keep people accountable for was the fact that during certain phases of the project, we needed to have a daily report kind of for general contractors. This gets them accountable for providing consistent updates and also provided the ability to capture photos and even add ad hoc line items to their report. So we can see this here. This is within QuickBase. This is a code page we built, and we can see that there is we have dates, and then the user can expand and add a series of photos as well as manipulate them right within the code page. Again, we are taking different softwares and consolidating them so they never have to leave QuickBase. And additionally, they could also generate a PDF. So no need to, ship some things around or whatever. They could say, hey, export a PDF and we're good. Again, minimizing points of failure, removing potential peripheral software, and really being the one-stop shop, so to say, for all of this activity. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned towards the beginning of the demo, executives at our client had really no idea as to, understandably, as to where things were, when, what thing was taking long, et cetera. And so we worked with the client to kind of identify, really boil down we have, I think, 6 here, like major components that they really would care about in regards to, hey, these are significant gates in our process. And then we had a rolling 4-week or 5-week, I guess, trend here. So at any point in time, we can see, hey, this week we're crushing it, we're doing well. Last week, maybe we had some issues around the DDP complete, et cetera. Obviously, we see zeros here. We scrubbed this for confidentiality, of course, but we've, to date, I think this application has managed over 600 projects, stores, restaurants out of their 3,000. Next slide. So financials, we of course want to help our client predict spend, how much is being actualized, where it's going, who it's going to, et cetera, where in the pipeline it is from a project schedule perspective. So working with the client, we created expenses basically. And we knew that, okay, every project at its core has these expenses, right? As a general contractor, it has, you name it, right? And then we also had the ability for them to customize these items from there. So we didn't lock them in, but we said, hey, let's save 90% of the burden by entering these line items in, and just assume that they are here with the ability to, again, cater to your need, recognizing that every product is different. But what we get here is we're able to see, again, money is important, and getting to see where it's going and how much is being spent on this program. Next slide. So another offering we made for this application was the idea of a punch list. So a punch list, some of you may know, is a very common part of construction, but a lot of other just boots in the ground, like in a store life cycle. And this was a template basically that we were able to spin up an instance of on creation of the project. So if I have a project at this store, we know that there's a milestone at some point in its life cycle where it is, hey, a contractor needs to complete a punch list. And again, this is all within QuickBase, no extra software needed. They navigate from the project to this page. And we can see there are some examples here, each grouped by part of the restaurant. So for example, like front service counter, et cetera, kitchen, bathroom, you name it. Again, we worked with the client to make the checklist. So inside the punch list, seamless throughout kind of the restaurant where what would best serve the flow. We also allowed users to, just like with the daily report, the ability to ad hoc add items to this and also specify what category. So maybe front service counter needs an additional point. The user could say add item to this specific category, and then it becomes a more comprehensive list for that specific project at that specific store. Again, recognizing that every product is a little bit different. Again, users can add photos, so there is some task delegation here in regards to who's responsible for what, and then also proof of completion as well. Nobody was left guessing if was it done or not. Again, increasing accountability, reducing holes in data, etc. And we also enable the users to generate PDFs of this as well to further the ease of distribution, basically, of data should it need to leave QuickBase, like going to a franchisee owner, etc. Next slide, please, Juan. So one of the more complicated, I know one of the more complicated bits in regards to construction is permitting. There are a lot of, I guess, hoops to jump through. And when you're dealing with things like red lines, etc., this is where a lot of time can be sunk and just going back and forth. So just to speak to this a little bit, we assumed on Project Create that we let the user customize what permits they needed for each instance of a project. So we did not assume you need a building and a health department, but we enabled the users to tick those boxes that says, I need a fire department permit, I need a health department permit. And then QuickBase would make those milestones for them. And it wasn't just on project startup too. Like if they needed to come back a week later and say, oh, you know what, I need a building department one as well, they could check that box and also populate it as well. We captured a series of documents pertaining to it. Each of those buttons, those green buttons you see there, prompts the user to upload a document. QuickBase is passing in a bunch of information behind the scenes to help automatically categorize it into that table you see below. So again, from the user experience perspective, it's just uploading a document like you would any other software. QuickBase is taking care of a lot of the heavy lifting in the background. Recognizing that at this point in time in the project, we kind of hit a point where it's not so linear in the sense that it's, step 1, step 2, steps 3. It's step 1, and now we have step 1A, B, C, D. And we complete permitting once all those are done. And so we had to build some pretty sophisticated logic to say, the building permit's done great. We also need the health and the fire as well. And making sure that we adequately demonstrate that in reporting, et cetera. So again, minimizing the mystery of where things are, et cetera. Next slide, please. I think that's it.
I think, Luke, just jumping in on this, I think that was like really amazing kind of going down through this, is when I think about construction and I think about projects from project kickoff to really kind of figure out like all of the different aspects. And you touched on so much, right? You talk about financial dashboards. You talk about project schedule. You talk about generating PDFs. Well, first of all, I start thinking about all that gray work too, but like just generating a PDF, I think is something that comes up quite often in construction, where they're figuring out information over here, and then someone literally is saying, hey, can you go type that up in a PDF or a Word document and copy and paste it? And we forget to realize that all the data just resides in the database. Let's click a button, let's automatically create the PDF overall. And so I think you guys are solving a lot of this moving forward. The permitting is always something that comes up, is how do we track that? You might have multiple people involved and nobody even realizes the dates along the line that actually has to be tracked. And now you have like a record of that. I can tell you about 15 times of when that was actually brought up in my past life at a contractor. So this is spectacular to see. Could you guys speak to a little bit of like the permissions, like rules? Is there just like one rule in this, or how have you worked with your customer and kind of think through, is there different rules, dashboards, permissions along the line?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was, I think we had maybe 4 or 5 different roles to work with. I mean, when you consider, this is this is a member of the, this is a staff member of the client. This is a PM. This is an architect. This is a GC. This is a furniture vendor, right? Like, so many people have so many just niche things that they need to touch. So that was in heavy collaboration with the client to build out some roles and responsibility matrices, and over iterative development, say what do they absolutely need to see on the dashboard, and then kind of going from there when it comes to reporting. It was just like building on the automations. You know, we had to take a slow and careful approach when it came to who should touch what, who could see what. We didn't want GCA to see GCB's project because, again, that's a conflict of interest and we don't want to show off competitors. So all of those taken into consideration when we thought about rules and roles and who can see what, who can edit what, who can only view what, right? It's it's never simple.
Yeah, right.
And to be really clear, Luke, those are capabilities built into QuickBase.
Correct. We did not have to do anything special there. Yeah.
Just the analysis part of it.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Yeah, we've got a few questions here, and if there are still some of you who have questions, please feel free to submit. But just taking a quick look, Bob, one of the questions here actually ties back to something you had mentioned, recognizing that construction can be quite broad in terms of different subsectors within the industry. Do you see challenges being similar in terms of whether it's an electric utility company, an organization that's working in the HVAC space? How do you see those challenges differing, if at all, or if they're very similar across the board?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's really kind of enlightening, and it's kind of reinforcing the fact that in construction, we are looking at the similar projects on a day-to-day basis, but from different sides of the Rubik's Cube. And when you look at that, let's talk about like an RFI process. Typically, we all have questions on a job. I don't care if you're a mechanical, electrical. I don't care if you're a drywaller. I don't care if you're restoration or whatever it might be. But that flow has to go back essentially to somebody, whether that be a GC, CM, et cetera, or maybe it just goes straight to the owner. Construction wears many different hats across the board. And what I continue to see is just the similarities that we have across the board. You just might be at two different ends of the spectrum. You might be the one receiving the RFI and having the answer. The other one might have to have this entire process in their own four walls to vet it out of, is this an RFI we even want to ask? So I've seen that from mechanicals, electricals. I've actually even been to an electrical utility and going down that path where it's the same problems. It's how are we doing our inventory? What are we actually putting on our trucks and our vans? And we begin to kind of explore all of the different workflows that I think go very nicely back to Luke's dashboard that could expand. So you mentioned iterative design, Luke, and building. Well, maybe the next evolution is bringing in those other modules, tool tracking, inventory management, RFIs, submittals, whatever it might be. Sky's the limit. And especially as we think about like labor shortages and other things, we're all saying the same questions at the end of the day. So think through it, figure out how to process map and what those really the needs are and the scope, and let's outline that, and then everyone here can build it for you. So
Thanks, Bob. We've got another question here, and I think this ties back more so with Dennis and Luke. Luke, the app you showed in the screenshots are very specific to that particular client. Working with a net new organization, what is Quandary's approach to gathering that client's requirements in order to build an application that's right for them? And how do you discover what's possible in terms of their existing landscape?
So Luke, I can take this, and then you can follow. So
Sure.
we have a pretty standard approach to discovery and reflecting back our findings and system design elements to a customer to make sure that we're all understanding what's been gathered and what priority items exist in place. So there's a fairly general purpose framework that we use. large design up front is something that is risky to do, certainly. So we try to take a more agile approach to everything we do, but we've come to recognize that design first is something that is quite important to tackle, because in a lot of cases, our customers are learning on the fly what software even can do or is capable of doing for them. So pretty interesting scenario. And so our standard tools, our standard approaches that we bring to bear really help us with that and help us really define enough design work so that we can start flying through using the technologies like QuickBase to actually do a build out and make sure we're building the right things. Luke, anything to add to that?
I mean, that was spot on, Dennis. I think, yeah. Just speak to a little bit about, I think, the net new client piece. I mean, being able to really understand the client's goals, where they see themselves going, really kind of empathizing with who they are and what they need to get. And also, to Dennis's point, prioritization really helps narrow the focus of the discussions. As well as just, again, make sure that we have proper prioritization. People are seeing the value of what we're delivering.